a luminary of the Oxford Union, and it shows. Good job. Doing what chief executives do well, which is to shape the culture and shape the conversation. We've got 25 minutes, and I have one piece of administration, just to understand what time do you think you're leaving? Right, your car's coming at 7:30, I'm told, so that's fine. Is there anything you want to say in response, or should we open it up?
I'm waiting to hear the answer.
Yeah. Who's got the roving mic? Let's have the answer.
Thank you. There are probably two parts to the answer to the question about really the call for support. I think was your point, Simon, from non-government organisations and government. I mean, the first thing is it's bloody difficult to develop these kinds of setups that we're establishing in Africa. I mean, we're a drinks manufacturer. We're not agronomists. We don't know a lot about that. What we bring to the party is the positive intent and, very importantly, an end market for a product. What we need is other people to bring their skills to really mobilise the thing and achieve the maximum. So that's one thing. It's simply practically a lot easier to get other people involved. The other bit is that the real foundation, I think, of the sustainability is that we are talking about a win-win outcome. I think it's a bit of what Gareth was talking about of good business. It really is a win-win. It's great for the farmers, it's great for us, and it's great for general wealth creation, the government and tax revenues, etc., etc. Without the cooperation, would we still do some of this? Yeah, we would, undoubtedly. Would we do as much as we are doing and intend to do? I think probably we would struggle more often, because we would get into the debates of trade-offs with necessary upfront investment versus future returns and all of that kind of thing. So I think it's the win-win outcome is absolutely essential to so much of what goes on in business, and that's why we really need to continue to work collaboratively.
Very good. Does anybody want to, just before I call random questions, so to speak, does anybody want to just challenge that issue about market failure, the role for government incentives, why do we need it? If it's such a great idea, listen.
1, 2.
Honourable Minister, my name is Prince Dr. Alice Natana. That is exactly what happened when it comes to the turn of Africa to speak. And if you're not careful, you will turn that to be sabotage. But I'm very patient. Somebody said you can shout. I really appreciate with deep sense of responsibility all that is happening here today. Especially a colleague whispered to me that this is the last of the series. I said I was very fortunate to stumble in it. But the major concern is being that from the caption, Business Action for Africa, it gives some of us very deep concern that we are completely excluded. I would rather want to see a caption like Business Concern in Africa. Africa with A-F-R-I-K-A, meaning all African descendants and friends. The main reason being that a lot of challenges of what is being talked, from corruption down to the way forward, to me is very much window dressing. I want to suggest and submit that the Honourable Minister and concerned citizens who want to move action forward should create a forum whereby we have a round table to tackle this issue in a more sensible way. For example, if you take the proportion of black African in this room with the ratio of non-black African, you say that the pendulum is not balanced. If you swerve, that is why the economic and the governance and things go well. Finally, I want to submit that with all deep sense of respect, corruption and attendant problem is being architected by the British Island. And if we want to sort it out, like William Wilberforce stood and passed a bill to stop slave trade, we can stop poor governance, corrupt governance, not bringing in money into British bank. We'll stop those leaders buying houses here. Raw materials, the prices will be determined in Africa and all of that. So we have the wherewithal to stop corruption.
Very good.
So let's face the round table and face the issue at stake.
Thank
and
you.
Some of us should be properly invited. I represent Aya Ngbambop Africa.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
And those are 2 points which have surfaced on other occasions, and it's important that you made them, about the importance of local participation and roundtables and corruption. You've got to go in a minute, Mike. Is there anything that you'd like to say by way of final thoughts on this, having listened to all these presentations? Strong call for partnership, strong call for further commitment by DFID.
Yes, you're right, Sam, and I also think it's given food for thought as to what I think should be the range of challenges that we perhaps come to next January in a series like this, to continue with the work that's gone on for the last 9 meetings, and the idea of partnerships. I think you mentioned earlier on, and I'd be really interested if people were of a mind to say, yeah, if they want to continue along with a further series of this, come up with topics, and I'm willing to look at what DFID can do to facilitate it, and hopefully bring others on board as well.
Very good. And just to pick up something you said in your own presentation about the speed of change in the world, and in particular the importance of climate change, and how we need to get to grips with this at country level in mitigation and adaptation programs, and involve local business and industry in making this change. So are you going to stay for another 5 minutes, or are you going to disappear?
I'll have another 5 minutes, so
Okay,
I'll push it out.
Okay, now let's just open up the conversation to people. So 1 or 2 had their hands up before. We'll take 1, 2, 3 there, and then we'll go to the back, 4, and then we'll see where we get to. So the gentleman in the glasses here at the front. Why don't you give me the words? So we know it works. If you can all keep it as brief as you can, we'll have more space.
David Smith from Zip International. I think the issues of financial inclusion are absolutely critical to the way the whole of this development debate goes on. I didn't have an opportunity to give you something to look forward to and to think about. I would think, what is beyond the mobile phone? Not in terms of technology yet to be invented, but in terms of technology that we already have that can take financial inclusion deeper into African communities.
And what's the answer?
Oh, it's a zip card.
And just, hello, what? This is kind of competitive self-promotion. What is this? You've got me hooked. What is a zip card?
It's a prepaid debit card being issued here in the UK under the FSA and with the support of the Bank of Uganda in Uganda, providing a bank account in a card for people who can just go into a shop and buy it.
Very good. Thank you very much. We're all convinced down here, please.
Did you get the sponsorship check from him?
I'm hoping.
Sorry. Connie Jackson, Strategic Change Associates. I liked what Jane talked about in terms of coming together, large governments, big coalitions for big issues. When I heard David talk about agriculture, I was interested that in talking about the volatility in commodity prices, a lot of that had to do with the fact that the developed world has heavily subsidized their farmers to maintain a certain level of commodity prices in the developed world. The coalition that really needs to come together is around the trade talks. I didn't hear any of these voices coming together around changing fundamentally the way agricultural prices are set and about engaging Africa with the rest of the world. And I think that's the part that's missing, because every time I come to one of these things, it's always about what we're doing for Africa. Gareth, was the first time I heard someone say something about, we're taking money from the U.S. and we're connecting Africa to the world. But I think that seems to be the part that's missing, and I'd really like to hear some discussion about that.
DFID's just made a grant of £12 million, I think, to the Fair Trade Foundation, which is not the answer, but is a contribution?
I don't care about a grant. I care about doing business on a business, because Africa is only going to be raised up to be the partner that it should be in the world through business.
Very good.
And that's the part that we really need to talk about.
Very good. Who else wants to? We've got one down here. We had you. We'll take this person here first, and then the lady in the glasses.
My name is Christian Tonnesen. I work with Acona, and we are a consultancy doing sustainability business advisory roles. My question to you, since you're here today, you're obviously leaders in terms of implementing environmental and social concerns into your business models. I was wondering, since you're selling it so well to us, whether you've also been able to sell it to the investment community. So if we look at your competitors in Africa who may not be as sustainable in their operations, would it be more difficult for them these days to raise finance for projects?
Very good. We'll take two more. The lady in the glasses and the chap at the back who's standing under a sign which says access, which is, I think, a sign from God, and then we'll let the panel have a word.
Hi, my name is Catherine Pulvermacher. I'm a director of a little consulting firm called African Rainbow Consulting, not to be confused, Gareth, with African Rainbow Minerals. And I'm formerly managing director of a trade association that goes by the name of World Gold Council. And speaking to your point, my very interest is in investment marketing, because for a number of years I ran a division that marketed gold as an investment and was remarkably successful. And Gareth, the solution to your problem is very simple. You don't need lots of different languages, because we all know there's one language that everyone understands: speak gold. That was an advertising campaign. But on a more serious note, my jewelry, or my former jewelry colleagues, used to look to De Beers and Anglo-American for their marketing expertise, because they are something of a leader in the jewelry space. Basically, because of what Gareth said, they are selling something that no one really needs to buy. Now, the reason that I got involved in starting up the company that I started up last year was because my feeling was that Africa actually has pretty much a similar challenge. And it is extremely difficult to raise money for African projects. Believe me, I've been trying to do it for the last 6 months. It's still perceived as extremely high risk, even though risk was probably arguably underpriced in the main capital markets. That hasn't actually helped to raise African capital. And so the proposal that I'd like to make actually is that, or that I'd like to suggest, is that we leverage the marketing expertise that you've got in-house at DTC by setting up a working group to see what we could borrow from marketing professionals and apply to the marketing of Africa as an investment destination.
Okay, thank you very much. And last but not least, access at the back.
So my name's Dapo Edimeji. I've got 2 jobs here. One, during the day, I'm chair of the largest charity looking after homeless people. But my day job is actually international tax consultant. And so I've got a question for Giorgio. I've asked Oppenheimer this question, so I don't have this question for De Beers. I already know the answer. The question is about tax. Just to make sure the question is understood, I have to preface it with just 15 seconds. In this country, there's a lot about tax havens. It's a load of nonsense. I know Diageo pays tax. The problem is that large multinational companies are paying tax in Western countries that they're not paying in Africa. The amount of tax that has been moved from Africa to Western governments exceeds all the aid that they're giving. So you've got this round trip where taxes leaks from Africa and is given back as aid with strings. So the question for Diageo is, how much corporation tax did you pay in Nigeria in particular and in Africa in general last year?
All right. we've got another 7 or 8 minutes. I'd like David to speak first, then Gareth. And then when we come to you, Jane, we want to hear what your 3 recommendations are. And then we will wrap up. So you have just 2 or 3 minutes each. David first. Okay.
So, I get a choice of the questions I choose to answer, do I, Simon? Well, not answer. I'll pick up a couple that are obviously directed at me. I suspect you know a lot more about our tax position than I do, so I hesitate to go there. I understand exactly the intent behind the question, but I really don't have the information, I'm afraid, to answer you on that. I do know we pay a huge amount of tax locally because of the way we form our companies in the different markets in Africa, which are mostly, nearly all the markets, joint ventures locally. But forgive me for not being equipped to answer the detail. The other question I'll pick up was the one about, what next, which is a great question. I think I'll kind of revert back to what I said earlier about the importance of win-win solutions and what Gareth phrased as good business. I think anything that we're going to do in the future, we have to get in that broad envelope of it's good business, it's a win-win solution in some way. Because we are commercial organisations and we have a degree of flexibility to, I say indulge ourselves is the wrong expression, but to extend ourselves in areas where there isn't that direct a link to the bottom line of our organisations. And I think the water of life is a good example of that. But there are limitations on that. So one thing we're talking about recently, and I'm not sure where this will go, is in the area of health and safety. We've been putting a lot of focus over the last year in health and safety, improved a lot of the stats for our employees, and we had a conversation recently about, wow, this is amazing what we're doing here. How could we get this beyond the walls of our operations? How could we actually start to have a benefit out there in the broader society? And we don't know the answer to that, but that's a particular area that we're exploring at the moment. And we're certainly, for example, involving extended families in various healthcare types of initiatives and things like that. So I think that's probably a likely area we'll go in the future. But let's not kid ourselves. We are a commercial organisation and we have to be able to at least join the dots on the types of things that we do.
Very good. Thank you very much. Gareth.
Thank you. I mean, I really only heard one specific, I think, question for De Beers, and that was the one around could we use our expertise to market Africa better, and I'm pleased that Stephen Lucia is at the back because he's responsible for that in our company. So that's something we'll certainly take offline, maybe think about, and how we would do that. And really just 2 observations to finish with. I mean, I firstly think that anyone in the room who's skeptical about the ability for organizations to act collectively, I would just say don't be, because I actually think there are really good examples of how true collective effort of large numbers of organizations and businesses deciding to go in a particular direction together make a real difference. I mean, the example I used is the Kimberley process as one, but there are many, many other examples, and of course they're not perfect, and they have, many issues that have to be addressed, but the change that they can make is significant, and I really believe it's something we need to lock onto. And the second point I would make is simply that I think we are in a changing world, and I mean, this is not something that has just happened because of the current financial crisis. But the current sort of post-Lehman world, if you like, has fastened the process. And so there's lots of debates in all your organizations around what does the new normal look like. And I really believe that the new normal is going to involve far more focus, as I said in what I was in my talk earlier, from the consumers about what they buy, about how we behave, and about climate change, and about all of these kinds of things. And they have to be baked in to our base business model. They can't be add-on extras. And I think that's a good thing. It doesn't worry me. I actually think that it's going to be part of the sort of things that people get taught in business schools. It's going to be part of the kind of things that you have in induction programs. And it's going to be the part of how the market, and that's ultimately going to be the test of it, of how the market will judge good and bad organizations, about the contributions they make, about the willingness of institutions to hold shares in those businesses, about the willingness of private individuals to purchase those shares. And I think that's an exciting world, and I actually think it will lead to a good balance. So those are some thoughts.
Thanks very much. Jane.
Thank you, thanks, Simon. And I'll close and try and answer some questions in the course of my three recommendations and ideas. And I think the first recommendation was, I think DFID can play a much bigger role, and governments in general, in convening some of these collective initiatives, and not then controlling it, but actually providing that convening space for companies and NGOs and others to come together. And it comes to, I think, the really, really important point made about trade. If we think trade, aid and investment are always going to swamp aid. I think there is a role for aid, but it's always going to be swamped by the other two, and it needs to be swamped if we're talking about long-term sustainable development and progress. And the trade agenda has been one area where there have been very, very few constructive coalitions. There's a couple beginning to emerge in the States now. A group, the Initiative for Global Development, was very active with a lot of the development NGOs on the Farm Bill. And they weren't successful on changing the Farm Bill, but we're beginning to see some of that. And I think the closest analogy in the States anyway is the Climate Coalition, the Climate Action Coalition, where big polluters and big companies and environmental NGOs got together. But again, I think it's something different, possibly with USAID and a few of the other bilateral donors could do, is look at how we can get a stronger business voice and coalition going for to challenge some of these trade subsidies, which most politicians admit, but then will not do anything about. So I think convening collective initiatives and the power of collective initiatives is one very important role that it can continue to play, because you're already doing it, but increase. And particularly, I think, at the national level as well, within not just Africa, but other developing countries. These sort of spatial coalitions have enormous potential. The second sort of broad recommendation is creating innovative financing mechanisms. I think we're just scratching the surface with challenge funds and innovation funds. USAID, GTZ, a number of the other donors are beginning to look at this space as well. I think that the leadership opportunity of the British government in innovation funds is enormous. And innovation funds, not just for the multinationals, but coming back to your question, for the African companies. And for the particularly high sort of impact entrepreneurs in Africa, I think the potential to identify leading African entrepreneurs and support innovation funding for them and access to financial markets for them is a key role we can play. I think also in the field of innovative funding mechanisms, the whole area of carbon finance. Again, we're just beginning to think about the potential of linking the carbon finance markets to development finance and adaptation funds, and thinking creatively about that is enormous. And one other area where I think that the British government can play a role is sovereign wealth funds, and the new donors, the Chinese, the Indians, the Russians, the donors in the Middle East. Qatar have just set up a development agency, looking at helping them right from the outset think about how they can support private sector development as a core area would be of relevance. So convening collective coalitions, creating innovative financing mechanisms, and then finally it comes to, I think, Tom's question on education, the whole area of capacity building. And I think it links back to your question to Dave on, there might be a business case, but then why do you need partnerships? Well, often there is a business case so far, but if you want to extend the value chain that much further, or you want to partner with an African company that doesn't have the marketing skills and the expertise, you can't often justify it up front. And so there's a combination of innovation financing, but also the technical assistance capacity building piece, capacity building local governments in Africa to work more with the private sector, capacity building teachers and educators and healthcare workers, and then incentivizing them to stay in Africa and the Philippines and other developing countries where there's a brain drain. The whole area of capacity building at the local level and capacity leadership building, I think is an area where the donors can work with business to have a more extensive impact. And then I would add now a fourth new suggestion, which is changing the mindset about Africa. And I think that there really is a need and an opportunity. I know Business Action for Africa is thinking and looking at that, and that might be something to look at going forward, not just in this country, but in the other big sort of donor and sort of financial flow, capital flow countries, how we can start telling not just the famine and the conflict and the corruption stories, which are very real and very serious for anyone who cares not just about Africa but other developing countries. But how can we start telling the stories of the amazing entrepreneurs, the social activists, local government leaders, teachers who are making a difference in people's lives, the good news stories? There's great potential there for the government payroll. Thank you.
I want to say two things to finish the meeting and the series. The first is the observation that all these inspiring stories about what happens on the ground don't just happen. They happen because academics think about them, because chief executives and their staffs do something, because all the many NGOs and consultancies in this room are on this every single day. And that is really the people who are here. It's all of you who are doing this, not just in Africa, actually, but around the world. And I think that is a real cause for celebration, because we have a story. And one of the most important follow-ups we've been talking to Mavis and her colleagues about is to make sure that story gets told. Because, as I said at the beginning, the crème de la crème have been coming to these meetings. We need to make sure that everybody else is aware of what the potential is. And although it may need government intervention, a lot of it is of a win-win character that benefits the businesses as well as the economies and societies in which they're working. So I think you all deserve, I'm not going to ask you to clap till the end, but you all deserve a huge vote of thanks for what you're contributing to this really important area. And we leave after 9 successful meetings. What do we do next? I think we have to be the people who proselytize for this. We have to tell this story, not in a hagiographical way, but in a really clear, analytical, careful, and often critical way. And we can do that on the basis of what we have. And we need to take this argument now down to the country level. And the most important frontier we now need to breach is to take this down to the Ghanas, to the Nigerias, to the Ugandas, the Kenyas, and everywhere else, and make sure that the work you've done so far is replicated. So I want to thank our speakers, and I'm going to ask you to clap them, but I'm also going to ask you to clap yourselves, because I think you are making a real difference to poverty reduction. Thank you. And as usual, we have a reception in the next door room, and we do hope you'll join us, and all those who couldn't speak will be able to ask their questions. Well, we'll see.